If you've been worried that Apple's first foldable iPhone might be delayed, this new leak is going to get you excited again. According to a fresh report out of China, the long-rumored iPhone Fold is still on track for a September 2026 launch, and the early manufacturing problems that had people talking about major redesigns have apparently been solved. Today, we're breaking down exactly what this new iPhone Fold leak says, what it means for Apple's first foldable iPhone, and how confident we should be in that September 2026 release date. Let's get into it. So, here's the headline. A well-known leaker, Fixed Focus Digital, has come out and said that the stories about the iPhone Fold being delayed are simply not true. According to them, Apple's foldable is on schedule. The production challenges have been overcome, and the final design is basically the same one Apple planned earlier in 2026. That's huge, because over the last few months we've heard conflicting things. On the one hand, some reports claimed that Apple's new innovative hinge design was so advanced that other foldable phone makers were planning to copy it. On the other hand, there were rumors that this very hinge had become a big problem, that it was causing manufacturing issues, and that Apple might have to go back and redesign the iPhone Fold before launch. Now, this latest leak pushes back hard against that idea. According to Fixed Focus Digital, Apple did what it usually does. It started with a small pilot batch of iPhone Fold units, produced strictly for testing. During that initial phase, Apple supposedly ran into some production challenges. The problems didn't show up at the prototype level alone. They appeared as the company tried to scale from a small test batch to a larger production run. That's actually very common in the foldable phone industry. It's one thing to build a few dozen or a few hundred near-perfect samples in a lab environment. It's something else entirely to push out hundreds of thousands or even millions of foldable phones with consistent quality, especially when we're talking about complex parts like a foldable OLED display and a precision hinge. The good news, according to this leak, is that Apple identified those problems early, worked through them, and fixed them without having to make any major changes to the design. In other words, no massive redesign, no abandoning the hinge, no starting over with a completely new structure. The leaker claims that the final production version of the iPhone Fold you'll be able to buy in September 2026 will still look and function the way Apple originally intended at the start of 2026. They even go as far as saying that a future teardown of the retail device will prove this point, showing that Apple stuck to its early blueprint instead of scrambling for a last-minute redesign. So what exactly were those manufacturing problems? The leak doesn't specify every technical detail, but we can make some educated guesses based on how foldable phones are made. With a device like the iPhone Fold, there are a few absolutely critical, high-risk areas. The hinge system, which has to be precise, durable, and smooth over tens of thousands of folds. The foldable display, which has to bend repeatedly without creasing too much, cracking, or failing prematurely. The transition from prototype to mass production, where small tolerances and tiny errors suddenly become major yield problems at scale. Other reports have already said that Apple's hinge design is considered so impressive that other folding phone manufacturers are watching it closely and even considering adopting similar ideas in their own products. That tells you just how ambitious Apple's hardware engineering might be for this project. At the same time, some analysts worried that this hinge, likely involving custom materials, intricate mechanics, and tight tolerances, could be hard to produce at volume. That's where the talk of delays and redesigns came from. According to this new leak, those concerns were overblown. Yes, the iPhone Fold project faced real production challenges during the first manufacturing phase. Yes, ramping up output from that small batch to a larger run was initially difficult, but the claim now is that the hurdles were overcome. And crucially, that Apple did not have to compromise on the core design of the iPhone Fold or its hinge system. So what does this mean for the release date? Fixed Focus Digital is very direct. They say the iPhone Fold remains on schedule for a September 2026 launch. That lines up with what we typically expect from Apple's major iPhone events, which almost always happen in September. Even more interesting, this leak lines up with what we've been hearing from the supply chain. Recent reports from component manufacturers have suggested that multiple suppliers are still actively producing parts for Apple's foldable. Those suppliers have not been told to slow down or pause production. There has been no official signal of a major delay from Apple's side, in other words. From the component side, it looks like Apple is still moving toward that September 2026 window without major disruption. This new leak from Fixed Focus Digital basically confirms that narrative. The iPhone Fold is moving forward, and whatever issues appeared during ramp-up have now been solved internally. But how reliable is this leak? This is where things get nuanced. The source, Fixed Focus Digital, is described as a regular Apple leaker with a mixed track record. They've had some solid hits and they've had some misses. One of their more notable successes, they correctly named the iPhone 16e before most other leakers and outlets picked up on it. That shows they do, at times, have access to genuine inside information from Apple's supply chain or partner networks. On the flip side, they also incorrectly claimed that the iPhone 17 would receive a 120Hz display without promotion. That prediction did not line up with reality. So we can't treat this account as infallible or perfectly accurate every time. That's important to remember. This is still a rumor, even if it's rated as likely by some coverage. The iPhone Fold is one of Apple's most ambitious projects in years, and plans can always change if new problems arise or if Apple decides it wants to push the hardware further. That said, when you combine this new statement, that the iPhone Fold is still on schedule, the claim that no extensive redesign was required, the note that manufacturing problems on the pilot run are now resolved, and the supply chain reports showing continued production without any major slowdowns, you end up with a pretty strong picture. As of right now, there's good reason to believe that Apple's first foldable iPhone is still targeting a September 2026 launch. So what does this mean for you if you're waiting for Apple's foldable phone? First, it suggests that we're less than a year and a half away from seeing Apple's full vision for the iPhone Fold. We're talking about a device that could combine the portability of an iPhone with the screen real estate of a small tablet, a new hinge system that might influence the entire folding phone industry, a foldable design that has gone through serious testing and a tough ramp-up phase before mass production. Second, it means Apple is likely deep into final validation and scaling. If production challenges really have been overcome without major design changes, then the focus now is probably on increasing yields, tightening quality control, securing enough displays, hinges, and internal components to support a global launch. Third, it hints that Apple has a lot of confidence in its existing design. If they had to go back and make massive structural changes to the hinge, frame, or internal layout, we'd probably be hearing stronger signs of a delay or a major shift in timelines from the supply chain. Instead, what we're hearing is the opposite. Suppliers continuing production, and leakers saying no delay, no redesign. Just solved problems. Of course, the iPhone Fold remains a rumor until Apple actually gets on stage and unveils it. And the leaker behind this new claim, Fixed Focus Digital, is not perfect. They've been right about certain Apple products before and wrong about others. But if you're trying to read the overall direction, right now, the weight of the evidence is leaning toward Apple's foldable iPhone launching in September 2026 as planned, with the manufacturing problems handled quietly behind the scenes. So, to sum it all up, the iPhone Fold is once again said to be on schedule for a September 2026 launch early. Production challenges showed up when Apple moved from a small test batch to larger scale manufacturing. Those hurdles have reportedly been overcome without an extensive redesign of the iPhone Fold's hinge or overall structure. The final production model is expected to stay very close to Apple's early 2026 design, something future teardowns may confirm. Supply chain reports support this narrative, suggesting no major delay has been communicated to component makers. The source, Fixed Focus Digital, has a mixed history with Apple leaks, so these details should still be treated as informed but not guaranteed. For now, though, the message from this latest leak is clear. Apple's first foldable iPhone is coming, and it's still aiming for September 2026.